Hello again, everybody, and welcome to the newest episode of Semi-Pro. I am one of your hosts, Dalton Barrett, and in the studio with me, I have got my great friend.
I'm Josh Clements.
Well, hey, Josh. How are you doing, buddy?
Yeah, I'm not too bad. I'm a little bit tired because we always have to record at like 1 a.m. my time.
That is true. We record
But
very late your time.
I'm good. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm hanging in there like a hair in a biscuit. I'm so excited for this week's episode of the podcast because we actually, for the first time in it feels like years, watched something really enjoyable. Like it feels like it's been legitimate years since we've
I
watched
I,
something I liked.
I forgot what happiness was in terms of watching movies that bring me joy.
And this
Um,
movie's not even
it's not good.
great. Like it's fine, but it was comparatively the greatest movie ever made. So
Oh,
I'm
this could
really
have been.
excited.
This should have taken all of the Oscars.
I mean, if the Oscars were between Mortal Kombat 1995, Mortal Kombat Annihilation, and Mortal Kombat 2021, it would have taken home every single Oscar.
I mean, honestly, yeah. I Mortal Kombat is the most fun movie I've seen since we started this podcast.
All right, let's hold off and let's get started. Thank you everybody for joining this episode of Semi Pro. All right, Josh, we're rolling. We're kicking it off. It's time to talk about Mortal Kombat 2021. Isn't it so exciting?
It blows that this movie has the same name as the 1995 one, so you can't ever say, oh, Mortal Kombat versus Mortal Kombat. You have to be Mortal Kombat 2021 versus Mortal Kombat 1995.
I guess while we're naming, we could just call it Combat
MK.
21.
Combat 21's close enough.
Yeah.
You're not going to get Spider-Man 02 rolling, Dalton. Don't even try.
Spider-Man 02 is what we are officially calling Spider-Man, the first Spider-Man from 2002. It's called Spider-Man 02. That's official. That's coming directly from Sam Raimi. He's
It's
the one
what
who
you're
told me to
calling
push
it,
that.
yes.
Sam
You
Raimi
can
told me to
call
push
it.
that.
No one else is. But no, let's talk about Combat 2021.
No, just
this
Combat
movie-
21.
This movie was not great, but it was
No.
so fun that I couldn't care.
I have a lot of issues, probably more than you do, because we did talk about this a little bit while we weren't recording, which was a mistake because we've wasted most of our conversation. But we can just, re-say what we said.
I have a lot of stuff that I did not talk to you about. I made sure about that.
Oh, I didn't. I told you all of my issues up front. So this movie is, it's based off of a video game franchise with a long history of not knowing what it's doing, and a long film franchise that also didn't know what it was doing. And so it had a really big task to overcome. And in some ways, I think it did a really, really good job of overcoming that. And in other ways, I think it really kind of missed the mark. But all in all, if you're a fan of Mortal Kombat, well, I can't even say that. I was going to say if you're a fan of Mortal Kombat, you'll like this movie. But I don't know that because I've talked to some people who are fans of Mortal Kombat who didn't like this movie. The biggest thing that we're going to have to talk about is the fact that unlike the original two movies, the one of the main characters who is training for Mortal Kombat is an original character. Whereas in the other two, it was all game characters. They didn't introduce anyone new on the protagonist side. But this movie does that, I think, in a really, really smart move that could have been handled better, but a smart move nonetheless. But I'm curious to hear what you think.
Well, so this is not the first video game adaptation that's come out. It's not even the first video game adaptation that's come out recently. And I was saying to someone, a big issue that a lot of these video game adaptations have is that you've got this original product, you've got the game, which is meant to be played over hours and hours of time. or has multiple games worth of lore. So you've got hours and hours and hours of world building and character building and all that stuff. And you have to try and translate that into an hour and a half, 2 hour movie. It's not really possible. So I've heard a couple of people, because I'm a pretty big Mortal Kombat fan. I've heard other big Mortal Kombat fans say that the Cole Young character was unnecessary, uh, uh, particularly that you don't need like an audience stand-in. But for a game like Mortal Kombat, you kind of do, because this is. Otherwise, you get Mortal Kombat 95,
Well,
where
I,
it
I
just
was gonna
throws
say,
you into it, and
my,
it's just confusion and superpowers and boredom.
my knowledge of Mortal Kombat comes from 95 and Annihilation. This movie does a better job than either of those do at kind of easing you in and introducing you to this world and this universe. Because both of those movies do a horrible job at that. So this one does a slightly better job through the introduction of a character like Cole. Um, but still not great. Like, it still doesn't do a great job at that. It does still kind of just throw you in because it's very referential to the old games, which I like little references, but when it's like plot points and stuff, that's when things get a little confusing. Nothing seemed to have any sort of rules. Everything was kind of all over the place, and it really took me out of it. I think I would have enjoyed it a whole lot more had I had a knowledge of what was going. Like, had I understood the movie, I probably would have loved it. But it was just a lot up front, a lot of exposition, and then I never really, well, not even exposition. It was more just like talking about what's happening would be exposition. I don't know how to describe it. This movie
It was a
was,
lot of. It was a lot of. It's kind of the same vibe as 95, where it's scene after scene of stuff happening, but this one at least has something that ties scenes together. So
yes,
it's not just scene after scene. Old person's fighting. Old person's fighting. Why? Mortal Kombat.
right. Huge advantage that this movie has over 95 is this movie has really good combat. Which, as you said in the 1995 discussion, it's literally in the name of the movie. Like, you have to nail the fight sequences in your Mortal Kombat movie, and 95 doesn't. This one does. There was no fight in this movie where I thought, like, that's poorly choreographed, like that, whatever. Every fight in this movie I was on board for and I was super engaged for. It's the other stuff that I was like, like the mystical stuff and all of that. Not because I don't like that kind of stuff, but because I didn't understand it, because they really didn't explain much of that.
Well, okay, yeah, that I can understand that, but at the same time, I kind of just took it at face value. Like you don't expect them to explain stuff in Lord of the Rings. You don't expect them to explain why orcs are a thing.
Yeah, but I feel like
Like
Lord
if
of
you're going into
you
a
can
fantasy movie, you kind of accept that there's going to be fantasy elements.
Lord of the Rings also doesn't paint itself in the real world either. Like this movie does. Um, like does that make a little more sense? Like,
No, I can see what you mean. Where like the first 30 minutes or so are quite set in reality.
well, this
Uh,
seems like the kind of thing where it's like all of this stuff is happening in the real world. It's just behind the scenes, and you don't know about it. Whereas Lord of the Rings, it's like, yeah, this is just a weird place to live. Um,
I guess, but even then, I'm more okay with that. Like, this is a personal thing. Have you ever seen the movie Stardust?
I don't think so.
I feel like not a lot of people have, and it annoys me because Stardust is a fantastic movie that everyone should watch, and I just wanted to use this to shut that out. But that's a very similar situation where it's very set in a real world. I can't remember the time period. I want to say this was like 1500s, that kind of period. It's got Charlie Cox and Henry Cavill in it. It's
Oh wow.
fantastic. But there's a very clear wall, and beyond this wall is all of this fantastical, magical stuff. Robert De Niro is a cross-dressing pirate named Shakespeare. There's witches and brothers who haunt each other. It's fantastic. I love the movie. Go watch it. But that had a very similar vibe to this, so maybe it's just because I like that vibe that I'm more willing to accept that.
Maybe
But
I don't know. I think you having a prior knowledge of the game also helps. Um,
yes, yes.
like I said,
Well, the
my
games also don't really build up to it that much. They just kind of go, yeah, it's all a thing too, accept it.
yeah, yeah, I don't know. Let's go into the plot. Let's break down the plot. So we open with a great sequence between who will become Scorpion and who will become Sub-Zero.
Right, Baihan and Bihan, sorry, and Hanzo Hasashi, who are
And
both played by Joe Talsim and Hiroyuki Sanada, and it's beautiful and
it
fantastic.
is genuinely a great sequence, and probably my favorite chunk
Yeah.
of the movie. And it's about 15 minutes or so. Um,
The first like 10 minutes is sort of after that point. Spoilers, I guess. Scorpion gets killed by Sub Zero.
oh yeah, this is like the first recent movie we've talked about since
Yeah, I
Christmas.
realized.
We should probably talk about yeah. Spoiler warning. If you haven't seen Mortal Kombat 2021 and you care, don't listen any further. Just come back later. But yeah, so Scorpion dies. He's murdered by Sub-Zero. So is his entire family.
Right, which is
Um,
there's also a nice little reference there to again this is the kind of stuff that I think that you'd like in terms of referencing because Scorpion throws his I can't Shirai or something I can't remember the name and I've just offended all of China and Japan.
it's a
But
gardening tool in this movie.
no, that was actually a thing in real life too,
Oh,
which I
neat.
learned.
Well, I know a lot
In
of Japanese like weaponry started as gardening
well,
tools
yeah. Do you know why?
because they were all gardeners.
Well, yeah, they're all gardeners, and then the Japanese government imposed a tax on like laws against owning, blades and stuff. So they just repurposed their gardening tools into deadly weapons,
Perfect. Yeah, exactly.
which is great. Yeah, so that's a nice little tie into genuine history as well, because this takes place in the 1600s, I think.
Something like that.
Um,
Yeah. I don't. It doesn't give a year.
no, it does. It's like 1607 or something.
What an oddly
But
specific year. But yeah, this is cool.
Yeah, that this all happens, and he throws that. It digs into a tree and he pulls it back, and it gives Bihan a nice scar under his eye, which is something that is usually found on his brother.
Which, yeah, I remember that from Mortal Kombat Annihilation.
Yeah,
Um,
where his brother appears for one scene and then disappears.
um, I did really like that fight scene specifically because it was beautiful and it kind of sets pace for the rest of the movie. It does bring up a big issue for me, in that Scorpion was on every poster for this movie. He was in every trailer, every little bit of advertising. He was advertised as the main character of this movie.
Yeah,
Um,
I don't know if I'd agree with that.
okay,
This is a
okay.
conversation that we had before, but
Yes,
I would
the
say, I
opening
would
scene
like
of
to
this
say that this.
movie sets him up as the main character of this movie, and then they kill him off in the first 15 minutes. Um,
I mean, I'd say it's an ensemble cast similar to the games.
this, well, we'll talk about that in a second because we flash forward to modern day, where we see who is the main character of this movie, at least who is presented as the main character of this movie in literally every way. Um, Scorpion's great grandson, Gordon Cole, and he
He's in Twin Peaks and he's trying to help his buddy. He's trying to help his buddy Dale Cooper solve a murder.
right exactly, and he's boxing in the ring and he's saying Gordon Cole, and he's boxing and he's having a great time and he's getting beat up all the time, constantly because he's a bad fighter apparently. Um, and then Jax shows up, just kind of out of the blue. Uh, it's really hard to talk about this movie linearly. A character named Jax shows up and introduces himself and says, "Hey, homie, we gotta get you out of here because you and your family are in danger because of the birthmark that you have. That doesn't look like a birthmark. It looks like a scar, and it is in the literal shape of a dragon."
And also,
Um,
they say it's a birthmark, and he goes, "What do you mean?" He goes, "He was born with it." That's the meaning of a birthmark.
yes, except for no one would ever assume that that's a birthmark, especially an orphan, because nobody told him. His parents didn't tell him it was a birthmark. Um,
But I guess the orphanage just assumed it was, and they didn't go, huh? It's in the perfect shape of a dragon in a circle.
they didn't assume this looks like a burn scar, and it's in the
The,
perfect shape of a dragon. Somebody
the child was
branded this
probably,
baby.
yeah, so this child was probably abused.
He was literally branded. Yeah, so Jax also has one, and that kind of sets up this tattoo, not tattoo, this birthmark. What do they call it in the movie? Your Akana.
No, that's just the mark. The arcana is the thing that you get once you have the mark.
Okay, whatever. They're all the same thing. Um, it's just Akana light. So they set that up really early on, which is something that we'll have to also come back to later. Jax, or while Cole and his family are out eating ice cream after his big fight that he loses, Jax shows up again with a van because Sub Zero starts attacking the family, and they hop in the van and they drive away. Jax stays behind to fight Sub Zero, and our main character Cole leaves to go find Sonya Blade. So one of the things I already like is sort of the way that they're bringing in the classic characters into this, all around the original character who is Cole. He's the one that was created for the movie, and they're sort of like slowly working their lives together, which I think is a really interesting way to do it. Like he's introduced to Jax first, and then he's introduced to Sonya Blade and Kano and so on, all the way down the list, which is a really clever way to do that. Unlike just sticking them all on a boat because they have to fight in Mortal Kombat, which is what 95 did.
That's a really great idea. I heard people defend 95 a lot more in comparison to this, and I just wanted to say it's okay to get help.
Yeah,
Uh,
you're wrong, buddy. Like I hate to be the one to break that to you.
I don't like being the one who says that, but you're wrong. You need to get in touch with reality. You need to secure a mental stable mind.
I understand that movies are opinion based. Like, oh, if you like this thing, you'll like this movie. 95 is just like such a bad movie that it kind of ascends like the whole like opinion thing. Everybody says like opinions can't be wrong, but Mortal Kombat 95 is so bad that it will make me say that your opinion can be wrong. Like it's rough.
But yeah, so that they bring in Jax, then fights Sub Zero to give Gordon Cole enough time to get away with his family. And Sub Zero takes both of his arms and then leaves him for dead.
Right.
Which is this is again something kind of neat to the games, which is in the games. Noob Saibot was the one who took Jax's arms originally, and this version of Sub Zero is the version that goes on to be Noob Saibot. So it's kind of it keeps in touch with what it's adapting while also doing something new, which is I think the best thing you can do while you're
Yeah, who
adapting.
cares? You're a nerd. Um
Yeah, exactly.
it is neat. I like that sequence once again. It's a great fight. And Jax trying to protect Cole so that he can go to meet Sonya Blade because Jax and Sonya Blade know that something is afoot. And they're trying to protect all the fighters they can because they know that something's about to go down. They don't know exactly what it is, but they know about Mortal Kombat in some sort of fashion. Although it's really never clear just how much they know because sometimes they know a whole lot less and sometimes they know a whole lot more. That is a neat aspect. It doesn't make sense to send Jax because he's the one with the mark when Sonya Blade doesn't have a mark, but that's a whole other discussion. Jax needed his arms frozen off so that he could get cool robot arms
Yeah.
that weren't just sleeves over his regular arms.
And he didn't just wake up in a laboratory one day and whip them.
Yeah, he didn't just say, I was trying to upgrade my arms, and then
And,
that's
and he
it.
didn't realize that the real arms were the arms he had all along.
So yeah,
But yeah, so he goes to meet Sonya. Sonya's got Kano in chains. Kano who steals every scene in this movie.
he's
Um,
the only thing that could have made Kano better in this movie is if he was played by Jai Courtney. Jai Courtney in this role would have been so funny.
okay, I love Jai Courtney. I'm a big Jai Courtney stan. But I love Josh Lawson as Kano. I think he was just like everything he said wasn't too over the top. It was the perfect
See,
cadence.
that's what I felt like he was missing. His dialogue was beautiful. Everything he said made me laugh. I think had he just been a little more over the top, which Jai Courtney would have brought, it would have killed it.
I love that bit where they go to meet Liu Kang, and Liu Kang fireballs him, puts his arm on his shoulder. He just looks so confused.
Yeah, he's
He has
just
no
lost.
idea what's happening.
Yeah, no, it's really good. So we're still trying to figure out like who this Cole guy is exactly. We know a few things about him. We know he's a family man. He loves his wife and his daughter, and we know that he has a dragon tattoo and can lose in MMA fights. That's basically all we know.
Yeah, and
And
so Shang Tsung sends Reptile to kill him because obviously he's a clear threat.
right, Shang Tsung being the actual main villain of this movie, even though he's not presented as the main villain of this movie, he's sort of presented in like the Thanos role in the Guardians movies, where he's sort of like he's in charge, but he's not the one getting dirty until he is the one getting dirty. And so he
He
kind of
would
takes a
send other
backseat.
people to- Yeah, he's sending other people to do his bidding.
Right, exactly. And so he sends a lizard.
A lot.
Yeah, well, he sends Sub Zero to do like everything. But in this situation, he doesn't send Sub Zero, even though Sub Zero is available now.
I hope
Um,
Sub-Zero is getting paid well for all of this because he seems to be doing a lot more than like Cabal or Reptile or Reiko or
Goro,
Goro, who just does nothing.
any of the characters who you would expect to be doing something,
Yeah,
he just
no,
sends Sub Zero.
Sub-Zero. So I can only imagine that Sub-Zero's got like vice president of the company on his business card or something.
I would assume so. It also doesn't make sense that he didn't send Sub Zero to do this.
Yeah, it seems like a perfect thing for Sub-Zero to do.
Well, and Sub Zero's been done. I mean, Sub Zero killed Jax. Like, it's probably been like 2 or 3 days since then. At this point,
I mean, even then, he goes, doesn't he? He drives his family to safety and he goes straight there.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. He goes straight there, but that probably took a
It's probably
while.
been like a day,
Yeah,
maybe.
maybe. Like, who knows how long it's been? Who knows where he took his family to? We don't know if it's their house or if it's someone else's house or it looks like a grandmother's house. Like, who knows? None of these things are explained. It's almost like this. Uh, okay. So
I would. I should just say, I think we both like this movie. This movie, as much as we're making fun of it,
this
it's
movie's
still
fine.
fun.
You
It's
like
fun.
this movie a whole lot more than I do. This movie is fine. This movie, compared to the other two Mortal Kombat movies, is a masterpiece, but this movie on its own is fine.
I mean, anything compared to the other two Mortal Kombat movies is a masterpiece.
So as this lizard is there fighting an Australian junkie, a washed-up MMA fighter, and an ex-Marine woman. Was she a Marine or was she in the Navy?
She was in Special Forces.
Okay, so an ex-military woman, a washed-up MMA fighter, and a drunk Australian. They defeat this lizard together, using the power of friendship, and then Kano agrees through
We
some
made all-
right, exactly. The real friends, the real lizard was the friends we made along the way, and Kano, through some finagling and lying, agrees to take them to Raiden's temple because somehow he ran drugs through Raiden's temple,
Well, I just took it as yeah.
or it was weapons, not drugs. I'm sorry. He ran weapons
I
through Raiden's temple.
he ran weapons that meant he had to run through Raiden's temple because he doesn't seem to know much about the actual temple. He just knows about the location.
But Raiden's temple is hidden.
Well, this is again something that's kind of from the game because he mentions that he runs for the Black Dragon Clan, who are the gang from the games, who kind of dabble in this mystical stuff. So it makes sense if you know, and if you don't know, I feel like that's one of those things where you can just you can suspend disbelief just enough.
Yeah. This movie relies on that a lot, though. That's one of those issues that goes into what I was talking about earlier, where it's like, yeah, it doesn't really make sense if you don't know, and you can suspend your disbelief, but when you're doing that for the majority of the movie, that's when it becomes a problem. But when they get to Raiden's temple, they're met by Liu Kang and the other dude, whose name I can't remember because I haven't played the games. The hat dude, Bucky Barnes.
Kung Lao.
Kung Lao. So they're met by Liu Kang and Kung Lao, where they're told, "Hey, you're here for Raiden's temple. We need to train you for Mortal Kombat." And so they walk in and they meet Raiden, just like that. No,
Raiden,
like,
Raiden does not want to be there.
no, he doesn't at all. No big reveal, nothing. Raiden's just like center frame, coupon shot, like he's just ready to go, and he hates everybody and everything. Um, just kind of like because like he literally hates everyone in existence, and we're not given much reason why, until the end when he doesn't hate people anymore, which I guess is supposed to be his arc. But
Well,
it's
his arc seems to be that he doesn't have faith in this round of warriors. It seems like he's just kind of given up on it all because the same with the first movie. They've lost all 9 Mortal Kombats. They have to wait for the 10th one, and the outworlds can raid on Earthrealm. And so that's why Shang Tsung in this movie's like, yeah, I'm just gonna kill them all before the tournament because then I can just win the tournament by default. I don't have to do anything.
he's not worried
And
about rules. I do like that they
I'm
included the line about the elder gods. Like they're
right.
too lazy to care. Like I liked that. They were like, okay, this is why nobody is stopping them from cheating.
Right, yeah, that makes sense because also, like the Elder Gods wouldn't care about this stuff. A piece of water and a piece of fire don't really. They're not invested in these people's lives or anything.
Well, we don't know who the elder gods are, so it does seem like something they should care about, but at least they mention that they don't care about it.
In compared to Annihilation, where they're just a really poor CG special effect, I like to imagine that they're a bit more sort of big and huge and extravagant.
You would think, and I don't know,
Yeah,
maybe this is just me. Um, maybe this is just me. You would think the elder gods would care about the rules of the contest they put into place to make sure that the thing that is going to happen doesn't happen. Um,
right, yeah.
it's
But
also
and
I also
I'm also curious why
find
he wouldn't like wait for the tournament because it seems like his people would beat them like pretty easily. These guys aren't great fighters or anything.
it. Well, so there is the prophecy which they ignore for most of the movie. Nobody seems to care about the prophecy except for when they do care about the prophecy. Um, and the prophecy is that Gordon Cole is going to be the savior that wins the Mortal Kombat and saves Earth. That's the prophecy.
The lineage of Hanzo Hisashi will guarantee victory.
Right.
That's the prophecy.
Right. And well, and I think it had like a certain number of generations after whatever.
Yeah, maybe.
I think I may be misremembering that. I could have just assumed that much. And so like they're trying to kill off all of the fighters, specifically Cole, so that there's no chance of that prophecy coming true. So I understand that. I just feel like the Elder Gods probably would care, even though they mention that they don't, and I'm glad that they do mention that they don't. So they're still trying, and they show up at the temple after Raiden just like absolutely claps back at all of these fighters for not being trained yet, even though they're there to be trained. Um, he's just like he's such a jerk in this movie, and he's like, "Yeah, you're a woman. You're a black man with no arms. You're Australian.
You
You
keep
got
getting beat up by everybody.
right, like you can't even fight in real life. Um, all of you guys are horrible. You shouldn't be allowed to fight in Mortal Kombat." And it's like, wow, um, okay, like,
Thanks,
isn't
Raven.
it your job to train them to win? Don't you know about the prophecy? I mean, you've mentioned it. It's painted on the walls of your palace.
Yeah, I thought I read like a note, like a sticky note that you left on top of the door that says "Find prophecy."
Right.
I don't know what you're doing.
And so after that happens, after Raiden just rakes them through the coals for not being trained yet, even though it's his job to train them, Sub-Zero and the gang show up at Raiden's temple to try and defeat them. And then Raiden makes a cool wall, which it seems like one of those scenes that are put in there. So it's like, yeah, people are gonna question this. Like they're gonna question why they didn't just show up at the temple. So let's just give a reason for them to not be able to show up at the temple. And then they're just kind of gone for about half the movie. Our
But
villains are just kind of like out of the scene.
Raiden Raiden puts up like a shield
Yeah,
uh,
it's a
against
lightning shield that he puts up, which is cool. It's a neat effect. And then, like I said, the villains are just kind of like they're out of the movie for a little bit while we train our main characters, which is neat.
Yeah,
Um,
there's a nice little kind of training montage with all of the characters where they sort of you find out a bit about their struggles. Like Jax can't do anything because he has twigs instead of arms. Uh,
which is so weird to me.
but you think that these guys, like I get that they probably aren't the most technological, resourceful people on Earth, but they literally just gave him. They found a snowman out back and they just took the arms off that and stuck it into his stump.
Well, but either way, I feel like I mean they look like Terminator arms, but they're also robot arms anyway. So why couldn't they just
Why not
be
use bigger ones?
strong? Well, couldn't they just be strong enough on their own? Like I feel like bigger robot arms aren't going to make the robot arms stronger. They're relying on like hydraulics and stuff. So why aren't they strong enough already? Um, which is
Kano, there is a nice bit where Kano fights Liu Kang, who holy crap is this guy in shape?
mm,
Like uh, uh,
yes,
Liu Kang, Liu Kang's doing a lot of like Bruce Lee stuff where he's shifting his body about, and it's you could chip a bottle cap off of him,
yeah,
like it is insane.
yeah. He's in great shape. I will agree
And
with you there.
he does he does a leg sweep on him, and he just repeats that move over and over again, which is a nice reference to the game again, where a leg sweep. If you're really bad at the game like me, and you also hate people like me, you'll just spam that move over and over again because you can't really dodge against it. So it's a guaranteed victory.
Yeah,
um,
which was neat, and Kano's reaction to that was also great. Like he didn't know how to respond.
he
It
did
was
like the jump and he missed.
yeah, it was great. He jumped and then the leg sweep went the other way and got him anyway. It was a beautiful scene, and this is when we're introduced to the idea of the Akana and trying to unlock your Akana so that you get cool superpowers.
Right.
Um,
Which is this is where I've seen Mortal Kombat purists take issue with the game,
well,
with the movie.
as not a Mortal Kombat purist, I don't take issue with the idea of an Akana. I take issue with the fact that it doesn't make any sense in this movie. Like it makes sense to have that, and that's a great way to explain this stuff.
Like,
But it's
like,
so undefined.
yeah, well, in the games, a lot of people have superpowers, like have technological advancements for no other reason than, and this is something that the original movie missed out on. You can't just have normal people fight against other people who have little superpowers and
Yeah,
then be like, oh, they won easily. Like Mortal Kombat fighting Scorpion is in reality a 5 second fight. Scorpion turns up, he throws his blade at him, and Johnny Cage is dead.
yeah,
That
exactly. I
that's
mean,
how.
absolutely. And so I like that they added that in, and they did give the normal human characters powers. Brilliant, smart, good. Do that, right?
But well,
Absolutely.
Johnny Cage. So again, I'm going to talk about Johnny Cage, even though he's in this movie. In I think it's Mortal Kombat 9. They say that Johnny Cage is descended from a Mediterranean cult that harnessed the power of the gods to give themselves like super speed or whatever. And that's how he has his powers. And it's like I'd rather they just do this, where they just
Yeah.
say, "Hey, you can unlock it by doing some soul searching."
It
That makes more
also it
sense
also
to me.
makes Mortal Kombat fair. Like
Yeah,
like
it
all
makes
these
it like
it puts
you ain't
everybody on an even playing field, right? Like Sub Zero unlocked his Akana, which at least that's the way it is presented in this movie. It's
yeah,
presented that all the realms have to unlock their Akana. Like people aren't, because that's the
yeah.
way it was presented. At least in the other two movies, is like the people from the other realms were born with cool powers. You have to like you don't have any. But in
Yeah,
this,
you can't train.
right? Yeah, exactly. And so I like that that idea where it's like, yeah, you kind of you unlock your powers and everybody gets a different one that plays in to something. But it's never explained how it works. Like Kano gets the cool laser eye, right? And that's cool, but that's all he gets. Um, and
Yeah,
then Liu Kang can throw fireballs and like it's never it doesn't make any sense. Like as much as I hate this movie, the fan four stick thing, where it's based around like
The
what
person.
well it's in you haven't seen fan four stick, but like Ben Grimm was holding rocks when the blast hit, and like it all had to do with what they were doing at that moment. It sort of like merged the two with them. um and then or you could do it personality based, like, oh well, you have a fiery personality, so you throw like there are tons of different ways. You know, you're cold and distant from your family, so you turn people into icicles. Like, you could have done it
Oh yeah,
any
that,
way
that,
other than the way they did it, which was just like, oh yeah, you get a random one. It doesn't matter. Like, you may be able to shoot lasers out of your eyes, you may grow big metal arms. Like, it doesn't make sense. The metal arm one really gets me more than any of them, because it's like, how does it work with electronics? I don't understand. um it's just super undefined, and I feel like they could have done a much better job at making it make sense. But they don't. They just kind of like say,
well,
yeah, you get cool things.
that's something again. This is all new territory, but no, I agree. Where it's like, in some cases it seems to make sense. So like Scorpion and Sub Zero, his clan, the Lin Kuei, they they basically revolve around ice and ice powers, or ice gods rather. So it makes sense that his arcana would be linked to that sort of elemental status.
But once
Coles
again, that's not
kind of make.
explained in this movie.
Oh, no. I'm saying this is what I agree. This is what it should have done.
Right, right.
Uh, like they could have expanded that a bit, or like Coles kind of makes sense because he's a punching bag, so he gets plot armor to be punched with. And then but then yeah, the stuff like
He's
Jax
also
where
the
it
only one
takes.
to seem to get clothes. Like, the rest of them don't. Liu Kang
Yeah,
doesn't even have a shirt to wear, and like,
Jax is weird to me because he has the stick arms and then his big arms build themselves like out of them, but there's nothing inside the stick arms to build out of. So
yeah.
it's very,
Well,
it's
they
like I
literally his Akana literally created matter, which I guess so did Cole's, but it's like, I don't know. It's super undefined, super weird.
don't know. Coles came from his bracelet because his bracelet was like the family thing.
Right, but now it's metal. It's a metal suit.
Now it's a Black Panther suit
Right,
from.
it's a metal Black Panther suit made out of vibranium with sword arms. Like it.
Yeah,
eh.
no, the Arcana stuff was undefined. As far as like a movie plot point goes, it's a great idea. It's
Oh, it's
fantastic.
brilliant. It's the perfect way to do this. I
Right.
that should be like canon in every Mortal Kombat thing. Put it in every game. Like, make that standard. That's a really good idea, but it has to be fleshed out way more than it was fleshed out in this movie.
Right. Well, I think I've said this to you before. I think the two biggest issues with this movie are to do with, I can only imagine, studio interference, and that's the shortened runtime and the reshoots, which the two biggest issues are the editing and the runtime. And the editing is something that you get used to after the first fight. It's a bit
Yeah.
like
After
cutty, but you
after
get
that
used to that.
opening fight, I was kind of on board with it, and it didn't really. It was never
No,
like, this is too much.
yeah, it never took me out of it after that first fight. It was just kind of. I think I've gotten too used to the John Wick style where it's long shots. There's no cutting. It's just ongoing constantly. Um,
And it sort of felt like it didn't really, because with bad editing, it could just feel like bad editing, or it could feel like a stylistic choice. This felt like a stylistic choice. And
yeah,
so for that reason, I didn't really dislike it. I kind of liked the fast paced style. It made the action seem a little, a little quicker, and a little faster. And so I didn't mind that at all. I can understand why people wouldn't love it, but it
yeah,
certainly
because
doesn't ruin anything in the movie.
no, not at all. The runtime, it could have used a longer runtime. This is one of the movies where it should have been 2 hours, like an hour and a half. It was good, and for all of these detriments, the movie's still a lot of fun to watch. Uh,
Well, it's fun to watch for the combat alone.
yeah,
Which
the
is what you're. It's the reason you're going to this movie. You're not going to this movie to check out the story. You're watching this movie to see.
I've seen people be like, "Oh, the story of this doesn't hold up to the Mortal Kombat legacy." What legacy? The stories in the games, if you're talking about those, A, they're the games and this is a movie. That doesn't count. B, the games don't have any story, and they reboot every other game. The last one ended with the universe itself being rebooted to the dawn of time. So I don't want to know what you're talking about. The movies don't have any story. There's no story in one or two, and people can try and tell me that there's a story in one, but there isn't. It's scene after scene of people fighting without any kind of link. At least this movie has a link.
There's a story in two. It's just a laughably bad story.
Is there a story in two? Because all I remember is they just wanted to fight people to stop the world.
Well, no. What's his name? Bigger bad guy.
Shao Kahn.
Shao Kahn came and he was like, "Hey, we're gonna defy the rules and invade anyway." And they were like, "Well, we got to stop him. We got to go get these people to stop him." And then they went and got the people, and then they stopped him. And Liu Kang turned into a lizard. I remember the plot of that movie. That movie was great. um, so after that, Cole figures out he's not getting his Akana, and he just kind of decides to give up because he's the worst main character in history.
Well, to be fair, Raiden's like, yeah, you suck, dude.
You
Go
know,
home.
no, it's Raiden's fault. Raiden's the worst teacher ever, like in history.
This isn't Cole's fault. Raiden's just such a bad leader.
Yeah, Raiden's like, yeah, you're not getting your Akana. Just go home, man. Go hang out with your family. And around that time, one of Kano's old gun running buddies, who is now working for not Shao Kahn, threw me off. Shang Tsung. He's now working for Shang Tsung, and he's like, I know this Kano guy. Like, we'll talk to him, and we'll get him on our side. Who is it? Cabal.
Cabal. And
Yeah.
Cabal and Kano are such fun characters. So the guy who did the voice for Cabal is the same dude who played Charles Manson in Mindhunter and Once Upon a Time. And I don't know what it is about the voice in this, but he always sounds so tired of everything.
Yeah. No, he
And
was another kind of standout character. I can't remember his name, but he was a pretty fun character.
I don't really think they mention his name. But,
Probably not.
Yeah, so Kano, he goes to talk to Kano, and he's like, "Hey, make some money."
Yeah, he's like, just ditch these guys, which is perfectly in line with Kano's character throughout the whole movie.
Kano's never been shown to be a good guy. He's always
No,
just
no.
been like, "Hey, you're gonna pay me for this? Yeah, sure, I'll do it."
One of the things I do like is that he is on the side of the good guys, and
Well,
at
like,
first, because he is just like a normal human, which never made sense to me in the other movie, where it's like, no, is he like a normal person, or is he from another realm? Like, I don't. There's a disconnect. Whereas in this movie, it made sense. He's on the side of the good guys. He's like, yeah, I'll betray him, and then he does. And then once the shield is down, Shang Tsung sends different fighters to take out the Earthrealm fighters, and it
right,
leads
yeah,
to
they
one of
break
my.
down the shield again.
It leads to an absolutely incredible action sequence between tons of different people, where there are tons of different characters from the games, and they're all just kind of like useless soldiers in here. Like, I know they have important stories elsewhere, but in this movie, they're all just useless bodies for our main characters to fight, which is great. Like, I know Prince Goro's got like a whole huge like history, and in this movie, he's just a body to fight, which is
And
fine.
yeah, well, he also didn't look like a man in a really bad costume that couldn't move or turn his
Oh,
head or speak.
dude, he looked great in this movie.
He was genuinely fantastic. He goes to fight Cole, and there's that great reveal shot too, where he like bursts out of the barn, and you see the two hands, and then you see the two more, and you're like, oh yeah, this is the stuff I came to see.
And it's the first time we see him because he's mentioned before, but we don't actually see him.
There's a shadow.
Yeah, they save it for a reveal for a useless character. And then he busts out of the barn, and him and Cole fight. While him and Cole are fighting, there's another fight going on at Raiden's temple, which is also really fun to watch, and we're kind of bouncing back and forth between the two. Feels very natural.
Someone,
What? Come again?
everyone's fighting someone. Like, all of the main characters have something to do in this fight.
Yeah, and it's great.
Yeah, and so Shang Tsung mentions his wife Natara, who's from I want to say Mortal Kombat Armageddon, but she's like a flying demon witch from Van Helsing, and she fights Kung Lao, who gives us our first fatality of the evening. and it is absolutely beautiful. Um, she flies down at him. He jumps on her, throws his hat into the sand, starts up like a sword blade, and then rides her through his hat, sawing her in half, covering it in blood, and getting you to realize, hey, this is what a Mortal Kombat movie should be.
And it's great. It's such a good sequence, and they didn't. What the danger that this movie had is they could have overdone that. With the R rating that they had, they could have overdone. They could have had like 6 different fights on this scale throughout the whole movie, but they saved it for like the climax, and it's only one. There's only one like all-out Mortal Kombat fight in the movie, and it's the one that we're talking about right now, and that was great because had you overdone it, it would have been like the Transformers thing where it's like when it's constant, it gets boring. When everything is exploding, explosions aren't exciting anymore. But when you save it for the climax of your movie, it's great. We have some more one-on-one fights later, but in terms of like everybody in one place fighting several different people, this is really the end of that. And it's one huge glorious action sequence. We're cutting back and forth, like we said, between Raiden's temple in the sand pit, which I don't know why they decided to fight strictly in the sand pit. But they
They didn't
did.
have money for the sets.
I guess, yeah, I guess probably. And Cole's house, where Goro has busted out of the barn. And this is where Cole does discover his Akana, where he fights Goro, which would be, and this is where I want to talk about what we talked about yesterday, would be like your big climax, your character has gone through his arc moment, had Goro been set up as like a character in your movie. But in this movie, he's just like a nobody. He's mindless drone for Shang Tsung. So it doesn't have that like that feeling of, oh, he's overcome what he was going through. Um, and when we get to the finale of the movie, we'll really go into it. But that is a big issue I've heard people talk about, and I agree with to an extent, is like Cole doesn't really have an arc. He's kind of the same from beginning to end, and he's not a great character in the first place. And so having him the same from beginning to end is sort of a detriment when he's the main character of your movie. But yeah, he defeats Goro, he gets his Akana, and he decides to go meet everybody back, and now it's the end of the movie already.
I, I guess, like I say, we talked about this last night. I would argue that since it's an ensemble cast, you don't need him to have an all-important arc.
Yeah, but you just
This is
because it's an ensemble cast doesn't mean he's not the main character. Guardians of the Galaxy is an ensemble cast. Peter Quill's the main character. Like these movies still, even an ensemble cast has a main character because you have to follow somebody.
right, yeah, no, sure, but in this one, this is his arc. Is that he moves from fighting these fights where he always loses to finding his strength and beating Goro in another really nice fatality where he stabs him in the eye, which looks really cool.
Yeah, it looks
Um,
really cool, and it would have a satisfying payoff, and it would work to complete his arc if Goro was a character in this movie, but he's barely a character. Like had they set him up, had they done anything like that to kind of build to him being in it, then that's great, that's fine. But they haven't. They've been doing that with a different character the whole time.
I I guess like it would definitely work better if Goro was a big character in the movie, but
But you also don't have time to make him a bigger character in the movie.
right, yeah, you don't have time to make him a bigger character, which is again why this movie would benefit from a longer runtime. Uh, but also, it, it's tough because I would say that there's the completion of his arc, and then from that point on, it's more the completion of everyone else's arc. So like he beats him and he goes back. Kung Lao gets his soul sucked from Shang Tsung, which is there's a great Cabal has a great line where he's fighting Liu Kang, who's Kung Lao's brother cousin, and it's he goes like, I love it when they get their soul sucked, and the delivery of the line cracked me up more
You
than
said it
any,
with a little too much enthusiasm because he still kind of sounds like he doesn't care. like it's the most he cares throughout the whole movie, but he still sounds like he doesn't care. It's great.
it's a brilliant line. I love it so much. But yeah, so Kung Lao dies and it all goes to the void, which is just a realm between realms, and I'm just couldn't you train there?
The whole time.
Yeah, like wouldn't that just be easier?
Or just Raiden's temple. I mean, Raiden can do whatever, right? Like, why not just make that a place where they can't access? Like, I don't get it. But that
Yeah,
would
it's
require
like,
Raiden to care about people, and that's
and they
clearly
very
not the
quickly,
case.
Cole very quickly goes, okay, you fight them, and then we all fight Sub-Zero.
Right. Which, sure, fine, cool.
Like, oh, and well, this is what I'm talking about. Where this is kind of the rollout of everyone else's arc, where
Had
uh,
this movie had a longer runtime, like you've been saying, had there been like 30 extra minutes to sort of flesh out, plan out each of the individual fights, and take a little more time into each of those, it would have done a little better job at completing everyone's arc. But it's just sort of like, oh, you fight them, you win, whatever. Like, take them by surprise so that they don't know you're coming.
well, like Jax fights Reiko, who's another minor character from the games. He resembles Shao Kahn a little bit in this. He has a bald head and a hammer, which is about it. But he fights him and he crushes his head and he's like, yeah, these arms work. Which is the place that he fights him is the pit, a famous stage from Mortal Kombat, which is nice. Bit upset that no one got thrown down the pit, but I can take it.
It's fine. It is called the pit, but whatever.
Yeah.
Um,
And then Sonya kills Kano and gets his mark. That's the completion of her arc to the
yeah,
point of
and that
she needs to get her arc on.
that's the one that it's like, yeah, this one feels the most like how a movie should tell a story. It's like, yeah, she's been wanting to get a mark the whole time because she really cares about this whole Mortal Kombat thing. She gets her arc by defeating a guy we all hated and killing him. A guy we love to hate and killing him. That one is the one to me that feels like, yeah, that's how a movie typically tells a character story. The rest of them are just kind of like circumstances. Like, it's like, oh yeah, I got arms, they work. Like, oh, okay. Yeah, sure. Um, but hers feels like, I don't know. It's just, hers feels the most like the compelling. Hers feels the most like a movie and a character and a story. Um, but yeah,
I think a movie would.
right. It operates in the way that we would say a film operates, whereas the rest of them don't. Especially Cole's, given he's the main character of the movie. Like I said, we're about to get to that. And so Cole says earlier that we're all going to fight Sub-Zero, but Sub-Zero has captured Cole's family, and they're frozen in the boxing ring where he was boxing earlier in the movie, and it never comes back up after it's thawed. Like, nobody else was at this public boxing ring. But Sub-Zero is there. He's got his family captured, and Cole starts to fight Sub-Zero, and he's losing. And then his grandpa, Grampy Scorpion, comes straight from the pits of hell to help him out in this fight, and starts fighting Sub-Zero. And it is a beautiful, beautiful fight between Scorpion and Sub-Zero, the two arguably main characters of the Mortal Kombat franchise. Like, the two iconic characters, at least.
Yeah, definitely.
And they start fighting, and it's a beautiful fight. And this is where my big issue with Cole's character comes. Because I think, and this is going to be like the most unpopular opinion I have ever had on this podcast, and there are a lot of them. I think Sub-Zero's death should have been given to Cole.
No.
Not because believe me, had they set it up for Scorpion to defeat Sub-Zero, I would be all on board with it. But Sub-Zero is the main villain of this movie. Scorpion is not a character in this movie. And he's the one who gets to defeat our main villain. That just doesn't work narratively. There's no, from an outsider perspective, there's no like payoff to that. Like, we barely know this guy. We don't know anything about him, like, other than his family's dead. And so for that reason, from an outsider perspective, like, say you've never even heard of Mortal Kombat and you watch this movie, it's not gonna give you any sort of satisfying payoff to see him defeat Sub-Zero at the end of this movie. while your main character sits on the bench and watches. That being said, the issue there comes with the fact that Sub-Zero is the main villain of this movie, not that Scorpion defeats Sub-Zero. Sub-Zero should not have been the main villain of this movie. So when you have Cole, who is the main character of your movie, and you sideline him just to give somebody else the fight against the main villain, it throws a wrench into the whole dynamic of your protagonist and antagonist story. I know you have to have Scorpion fight and defeat Sub-Zero. That's Mortal Kombat. That's the thing. Like every franchise has something you have to do, you know? Like Spider-Man has to defeat Green Goblin. That's the way it works. You can't have Mr. Fantastic come in and defeat Green Goblin. I get that. But you also have to set it up in a way where that narratively feels right. Like, you can't have Green Goblin as the main villain of a Fantastic Four movie, and then at the end of the Fantastic Four movie, Spider-Man just comes in to defeat him. Like,
I would say that this does work out, though.
It doesn't.
The very first thing that we see is the rivalry between Sub-Zero and Scorpion. Like, that's literally how we're introduced to the world. So I think it's fine to end on that rivalry.
It's not, because once again, not from a person who is a fan of this stuff, that seems like you're setting up Cole's arc. In fact, that perfectly sets up Cole's arc as his descendant. That's a movie. Take Mortal Kombat out of it completely. In any other movie, you have like this thing where a guy comes in, kills a guy's family, there's one survivor, that person's descendant is now placed in a fight against the person who killed his family thousands of years or hundreds of years ago. That's an arc. That's a movie. That's the way a movie works. But then they bring the guy who was dead back from the dead to fight him. Like that, once again, from a Mortal Kombat perspective, I get it. From a movie perspective, that doesn't work. That's not like they even from the way this movie works, they still set up Cole to do it. They just don't let him do it.
I can see where you're coming from.
Because
really
I'm
do.
right.
No, you're not right. I can see where you're coming from. Like, it doesn't make it right though, because the entire through line, not for Cole but for Sub-Zero, is his beef with Scorpion. Like that's again the introduction of the movie. That's how the movie starts out, and the movie starts out with Scorpion dying and his last words being, "You will remember this face."
Right. Once again, setting up his descendants who share his features, defeating him. I'm not saying that's what they meant to set up, but that is what they set up when you watch this movie. When you watch this movie as a movie and not as a Mortal Kombat movie, they set up Cole beating Sub-Zero. That is what is set up. I'm not saying it should have been what is set up, because I don't think it should have been, but that is what is set up in this movie. That is the through line of this movie, is Cole, the main character, hero of the movie, defeating the main villain at the end of the movie because he killed his ancestors.
Would it worked better if Cole fought Shang Tsung after the beam? Sure, absolutely.
No, because they didn't set up Shang Tsung as the main villain of this movie. They set him up for future stuff. Now, let's do it like this. What if it was Goro who was the main villain of this movie the whole time? He was the one going around trying to take out the fighters. He was the one doing all of this stuff. Sub-Zero's not even in the movie at all. He's not a character in this movie. Would it have... Let's even say, because that's the plot of this movie, they ignore all Mortal Kombat like altogether, and Goro is the one who kills Scorpion at the beginning of the movie. Does it still make sense for Scorpion to come back at the end and kill Goro, or does it make sense for Cole to do it?
If Scorpion pledged to end his life even through the fires of hell to end Goro, yes, it absolutely.
But they don't say that in this movie.
Yes, they do.
They show two clips, and it's the same clip used twice of him in a vision. That's not setting it up. Without prior knowledge of this stuff, that doesn't make sense. That doesn't set up anything.
They do. He sets up when he fights with Sub-Zero, and then Raiden sets up again when he talks about what's happening to Scorpion.
It doesn't
Showing it.
work. It does not work from a movie perspective. This final fight does not work from a storytelling perspective in a movie. It's not set up. It doesn't work. You have to set up your, if you have a main villain who you've been building your whole movie, you have to have a character who you know defeat him. That's the way movies work. You can't have just some random dude who we've never seen before come in to save the day.
Right. That's describing Cole.
No, Cole's the main character of the movie. We've been learning about him and growing with him the whole time.
Cole's the audience standing, but he doesn't do anything in the movie, so he's not the main character of the movie.
Because he is the main character of the movie. What are you talking about? He's literally the only main character of the movie. Other than Sonya Blade, he's the only one who's given any sort of character arc. And Sonya Blade's character arc is completely circumstantial.
He's the audience standing, sure, but he's not the main character.
No, he is definitely the main character. He's the one we focus on the whole time. Other than he's the antagonist. He's the main antagonist, but Cole is the main protagonist.
You follow his story more than anyone else's.
Do you? Because he kind of just shows up, kills people, and then leaves.
Yeah, that's more of a story.
Not really. I mean, Cole's growing. He's protecting his family. He gives up halfway through. He does all of the things that a main character should, except for defeat the bad guy at the end.
Again, that doesn't make it. The main character, the main antagonist, sets up an ongoing, even past death rivalry with someone else. It doesn't make sense to just have some random dude come in and end that rivalry.
He's not some random dude. He's the main character of your movie, a descendant of the guy who was part of the rivalry. And he's already part of the rivalry because he's part of his family.
That doesn't give him any more attachment to the rivalry, though.
You don't need attachment. He is the person who this movie frames as the main character. Is it done perfectly? No. Is it done well? Not really. But he is the person who this movie sets up as the main. The same way that Liu Kang was set up as the main character of 95, but isn't treated as the main character. Cole is more treated as the main character of this movie.
You are a fool.
Why? Then nobody's going to sit here other than you and disagree with me that Cole is the main character of this movie. They may disagree that he should have had the final kill of the movie, and I also disagree with me like half on that. From a Mortal Kombat perspective, I disagree that should have happened, but from a movie storytelling perspective, that's the way that this story was headed. But Cole was like unequivocally the main character of this movie. He not only is he the audience stand-in, he's the one we spend the most time with. He's the one who is the emotional driving force of the movie. Like he's easily the main character. Paul W.S. Anderson would tell me that he's the main character of this movie.
Paul W.S. Anderson would say that he's made good movies. And he'd also be
well, that's an excellent point. But for me, it's like, oh, it's easy. When you look at everybody in this movie and say who's the main character, it's easily Cole.
He tries to be the main character. That doesn't make him a good one or one that I would care about.
We never said that. We said that he is the main character. And from
I care more about Scorpion, and in that respect, Scorpion makes more sense to end Sub-Zero.
You only care about Scorpion because of other stuff, though. You don't care about Scorpion because of this movie.
Because of the movie. Even from a movie's perspective, you care about him more. He had his family in it. He has an infinitely more interesting character, especially when compared to his rivalry with Sub-Zero.
Sub-Zero, who is actively trying to kill his descendants' family, like in the moment, which by the way gives Cole more reason to defeat him than Scorpion. Scorpion's family's already dead. It's in the past. It's done. Cole's family is waiting in the lines at the moment to be killed.
By this point, Scorpion has saved his family.
No, no,
this point,
they're still frozen until after the fight is over. The ice on.
Scorpion threw down that fireball, which woke them up and got them out of the ice.
That happens after the fight.
That doesn't happen after the fight. Sub-Zero's not dead by that point. Sub-Zero throws Scorpion. He does that to get out, and then they fight him more.
Josh, I understand Scorpion has to fight Sub-Zero because it's Mortal Kombat. I'm not arguing against that. That has to happen.
Yeah,
Don't
I know
set
you're
up
not.
Sub-Zero as the main villain of your movie if you can't have your main character defeat him. That's
I
the
don't care
issue
about
this
the main
movie
character.
has. That is
No,
the issue that this movie has. They set
the
up a
main.
main character to defeat a main villain, and then they let somebody else come in and do it. That doesn't work.
It doesn't work. No, it does work because the main character is completely uninteresting, and by this point has had his arc.
So is the character who comes in to defeat him.
Oh yes.
He was interesting in the first 15 minutes of the movie. That was an hour and 15 minutes ago. I've lost interest.
Yes, but I've lost more interest in Cole than I have in Scorpion.
Once again, the issue comes with Sub-Zero being the main villain of this movie. Sub-Zero should not have been the main villain of this movie, but they set him up as that. If it was anybody else, not only would it have made the movie better from a storytelling perspective, it would have gave the end fight a bigger payoff, it would have made us feel more complete in our story, and on top of that, it would have made Cole a more interesting character inherently because he goes through an arc to get to where he's going. Once again, make the main villain of the main henchman who's going around killing all these people Goro, and have Cole defeat Goro at the end, and then do a little like tease at Scorpion Sub-Zero at the end of the movie. Not only have you set up a sequel, but you've made this movie like 4 times better in the process.
It doesn't work because again, Cole is just brutally uninteresting as a character.
He's not
isn't-
that uninteresting.
He absolutely is.
He's not a stellar character or whatever, but the thing that makes him uninteresting is he doesn't get to do the thing that he should do. He's unsatisfying because he doesn't get to
He gets that when he kills Goro.
Yeah, but killing Goro means nothing. Killing Goro literally means nothing because we don't know anything about Goro.
You don't need to know anything about Goro.
Yes, you do. If you're going to feel satisfied in your main character's arc in killing a guy, you need to know a thing or two about the guy who he kills.
Not when your idea is that you're giving the main character an arc when all you know about the main character is that he can't win fights for himself anymore.
It would be like making a Superman movie where you have Lex Luthor in the movie, and instead of letting Superman fight Lex Luthor isn't a character at all, and some random villain shows up halfway through who Superman has to fight, and that's now how we know that Superman is a hero. We've never seen this guy before. We've never heard of this guy before. We just know maybe he's strong. He looks strong, and that's literally all we know about this character. You can't do that. That doesn't give any sort of emotional response to tie into the fight, and it doesn't give any sort of arc to the character because we don't know anything about the character who he defeated in the first place.
It'd be like having a Star Wars movie where all you set up is that Luke Skywalker has some kind of main beef with the bad guy, and then at the end of the movie, him and the bad guy fight while the actual main character gets away.
Yeah, see, you say that, but they don't set up beef in that movie, so you...
Yeah, they do.
No,
they
they don't.
absolutely do.
They don't set up... No, hold on. We're about to go on a Last Jedi tangent. They don't set up Luke having beef with Kylo Ren. They set up Kylo Ren having beef with Luke. Luke is sad about what he did to Ben. Ben is angry about what he did... of what Luke did to him. Luke is not angry. Luke is upset and disappointed with himself. It's not the same arc at all.
It absolutely
Back
is.
to
It
the point.
absolutely is. It absolutely is.
No, it isn't.
The point is, Dalton, it's a popcorn flick. This movie, this is why I
Even
like
a
this movie.
standard popcorn flick understands how to tell a hero story, Josh.
this is-
That's
this
the
is why-
problem.
This is why I like this movie so much. And maybe it's because of the DCU. Maybe it's because of Zack Snyder. Maybe it's because of the general state of filmmaking nowadays. But I don't care because this movie knew exactly what it was. This movie knew it was. You were turning up to watch people fight. You were turning up to
But
watch. Some
this
blood and
movie
guts
is
go flying.
below
You were turning
average
up
for
to
that
watch
kind
some
of
nice
movie.
choreography. And then at the end of it, you were turning up to watch Sub-Zero fight Scorpion, and you can go home and you're like, hey, that was a lot of fun. The music was nice. The music didn't have some weird techno dance in the middle of it. It had some dubstep ending over the credits. And hey, all of the fights looked kind of cool. And when Kung Lao sawed that person in half, I was cheering. And when
That's
Liu
not the
Kang
point of
killed
the movie
Dragon-
that you should be focused on. The point of the movie you should be focused on is the big epic final fight scene where your main character defeats your main bad guy. That's popcorn flick 101, and they fail.
They don't fail. They make the cool character fight the cool bad guy.
But he's not a cool character in light of this movie. He is not a cool
Absolutely.
character because of the way he's presented in this movie. He's a cool character because of your background knowledge of who he is.
The background knowledge of who he is the exact same as the background knowledge presented in this movie.
No, it's not. You've told me tons of stuff where it's like, oh, he did this and this and this and this. If you want to do that, make him the main character of this movie. Focus the entire movie on him training in hell or whatever. Like, it doesn't...
You see the cool stuff that he does in this movie.
No, you don't. You see one scene and he's psychedelically wrapping a wrap around a gardening tool. That's not cool.
Yeah, but watching him impale like 6 people afterwards on that gardening tool is.
But that's the opening 10 minutes of the movie, Josh.
It doesn't matter.
You can't... that is... Once again, you're coming to this with a background knowledge of that character and these movies. I'm coming to it without a background knowledge of that character and these stories. From my perspective, not understanding any of that, it didn't work. It didn't work on its own.
The background knowledge of these characters in reference to this movie is the exact same thing. That Scorpion and Sub-Zero don't do any more in the games than they do in this movie, essentially.
That's not a good thing. They don't do anything in this movie. The only person who does anything in this movie is Sub-Zero. Scorpion doesn't do anything. He kills some dudes with a gardening tool and then shows up at the end. That's not... he's cool because his action is neat, but his story isn't special.
Right, but this movie doesn't pretend to be anything more than dumb action.
Once again, this movie is below average for this type of movie. I'm not saying this movie should be more than it is. This movie is below average for a dumb popcorn flick.
It's above average. If you want
whatever.
If you want below average for whatever this type of movie is, you're gonna go watch Mortal Kombat 95, or you're gonna go watch Doom, or you're gonna go watch any of those, because I can tell you they don't know what they are. They know. This movie knows that it's trying to get you to watch some cool fights and then go home and be like, hey, I watched some cool fights. That was nice. Every other movie tries to pretend to be something more than it is. It tries to be some epic story that spans 50 generations, or it tries to be some period art piece of movie making. And this movie does not pretend for a second that it is anything more than watching you punch a man's heart through his body. And I respect that beyond belief.
We gotta go, Josh. You're an idiot. This movie...
This conversation is going to be continuing into next week's podcast.
This final thoughts on this movie. It's fine. There are very minor tweaks that this movie could have made to the story that would have vastly improved this movie. That being said, I like a lot of the things that they've set up, and I'm excited to see the sequel to this movie because I think they can, now that they've gotten all of the things that they have to do out of the way, because that is what this movie felt like. It's like, we've got to do this. Now that they've gotten that out of the way, we can explore more like story, character, like things like that in the next movie. The action was great. I would absolutely recommend this movie, especially if you're a Mortal Kombat fan. As far as as far as it all goes, there are, like I said, a lot of just little minor tweaks you could have made that would have made this movie much better than it actually is. Not that it's bad. Well, it's not good, but it's not bad. And there's a lot going for it that kept me engaged. None of that stuff was the stuff that should keep you engaged in a movie, but a lot of stuff did keep me engaged nonetheless. And that, I guess, is kind of my final thoughts. I would definitely recommend it. But there are some major issues from a like very standard storytelling perspective that this movie just left out. And I guess that's where I'm going to leave it.
I like this movie. This movie was a fun popcorn flick. It knew you wanted to see some nice fights, and it delivered on every one of those fights. You're going to love it if you're a Mortal Kombat fan. You also might hate it because it's not an exact one-to-one copy of the games, and it has some original ideas.
That is one thing. Let me mention that really quickly. This movie is also made for like no one. because it's not close enough to it's. And I usually like movies that are like that, where it's like, yeah, this is not like, well, no. I like the half of it where it's like, yeah, we ignored a lot of the source material because it doesn't work when you're making a movie. And then it's made for like normal people, not like fans of the franchise. I typically prefer movies like that. This movie falls in a really weird category where it's not made for those people, but it's also not made for casual fans. It's like right smack dab in the middle. So it's kind of made for nobody but you, Josh. Because it doesn't have enough original stuff or like solid storytelling that is different from the games to put it in one category, but it doesn't have enough that is like from the games to put it in the other category. So it falls into this weird like no man's land. And that is one big criticism. And I just wanted to mention that real quick before we get out of here.
I like this movie. I think it's worth the watch. It's worth the watch for at least deciding whether or not you like this movie. It's a movie that I went into, didn't have high hopes, and it delivered just enough to make me entertained for an hour and a half before I realized that Mortal Kombat 1995 exists and people are going to try and argue why that's better.
Oh,
It
no way. This movie is not even close to.
I saw someone try and say that 1995 Kano was better, and all I could think was I don't remember a single thing Kano did in that movie.
I remember he's the only one who makes sense, but that's all I remember from him in that movie.
I remember him turning up at the start to lure Sonya Blade in,
Yeah.
and then he disappears and dies.
Yeah, well, he has the one line where it's like, "Yay, mate, Sub-Zero's fighting a normal dude, and it's really unfair and weird." And it's like, oh yeah, that's the only thing in this movie that makes any sense at all. But yeah, both Annihilation and 95, this movie is a million times better than.
Yes, this movie is at least somewhat good.
Like I said, this is the first enjoyable movie we've talked about since Kong 2005, which is what we started talking about before we talked about Mortal Kombat movies. So I guess it hasn't been that long. But it is the best Mortal Kombat movie ever made.
That is at least technically true.
I can confidently say this is the best live-action cinematic Mortal Kombat movie that has ever been released.
And next week we'll be watching the best live-action superhero movie that has ever been thought of.
Yes, I'm very excited. I hinted at it during this episode, but we are going to be watching and talking about Fan Four Stick next week, which may lead into a reverse order series on the Fantastic Four series. We'll just have to see. But thank you guys for taking a chunk out of your day. This is the longest episode of the podcast in history.
And it will be the last.
And it will be the last, as it is every week. Thank you for taking a chunk out of your day to listen, whether you're listening on Spotify, iTunes, wherever you listen to podcasts. If you want to and you feel like it, leave this thing a rating, maybe a review. It helps boost out the engagement so that people can watch it. If you're watching on YouTube or elsewhere, I don't know where else you'd be watching, but maybe give it a thumbs up, drop a comment, subscribe to the channel, whatever you want to do. Thanks once again for listening to this episode of Semi Pro.